No movie is perfect, and most movies are far from it. Flaws are an inherent part of the filmmaking process, and great films can usually weather those nagging issues or even wear them proudly. But sometimes a film can be saddled with one problem so glaring that it ends up derailing the entire endeavor in one fell swoop. And of all genres, this is certainly true in the horror realm. Even accepting that horror fans are an enthusiastic, even forgiving bunch, these films were all hobbled by one issue so egregious, so off-putting, that it basically sank the whole cinematic enterprise. I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 horror movies ruined by one thing. Number 10, the awful social commentary, Halloween Kills. Now, credit where it's due, Halloween Kills absolutely delivered on the promises of its title, serving up the highest body count of any film in the franchise. Michael Myers has never looked more savagely, ferociously imposing than he does here, especially during that gorgeous opening massacre of the firefighters who show up to Laurie's burning house. The gory kill sequences are basically enough to compensate for the fact that Laurie spends most of the movie confined to a hospital bed. But what really sinks Halloween Kills is the picture's groan-worthy attempt at social commentary. Much of the film is centered around the efforts of a vigilante mob, formed by now adult Myers survivor Tommy Doyle, to hunt down and kill the Shape. This subplot is clearly intended to note the dangers of mob mentality, but the sheer stupidity of the mob's actions, namely chasing down an escaped convict who clearly isn't Michael, and their moronic, never-ending utterance of "evil dies tonight," makes it impossible to take any of it seriously. The commentary is so bluntly on the nose, so lacking in nuance, and so poorly executed on the whole, that it's honestly tough to believe an adult actually wrote any of it. It's juvenile and silly in all the wrong ways, and makes it tough to consider re-watching the entire movie, especially when you can just watch a montage of all the gnarly kills on YouTube. Number 9, erasing the practical effects. The Thing. Making a prequel to John Carpenter's inimitable The Thing was always going to be a thankless task. But 2011's The Thing did a rock-solid job of replicating the unnerving, paranoid atmosphere of John Carpenter's original, aided by a stellar ensemble cast. However, The Thing 2011 made one major misstep that basically confined it to the pop culture dustbin, settling on VFX for the film's grotesque transformation and mutation sequences. This is especially egregious as the movie was originally shot with practical animatronic effects in line with Carpenter's original, but after test audiences complained about said effects, Universal panicked and had them painted over with CGI instead. The result is an abject mess, with the CGI transformations looking incredibly video gamey and lacking the disturbingly uncanny quality of the practical effects from the 1982 classic. And more to the point, this did the film's box office no favors at all, as it was still a catastrophic flop. Fans have since passionately campaigned for Universal to release a cut which restores the original effects, though given that this prequel has been all but forgotten, it seems incredibly unlikely to ever happen. Number 8. Dewey's lousy death, Scream. 2022's fifth Scream film did the one thing many fans never expected. It killed off one of the slasher series' original protagonists. Fan favourite Dewey Riley bites it in the movie, and though there's nothing inherently wrong with killing one of the OG heroes, the execution sure left a lot to be desired. Though Dewey gets a great arc in the first half of Scream 2022, presented here as something of a grizzled, depressed gunslinger who returns to duty to take down the new Ghostface, his death ultimately requires him to pick up the idiot ball with reckless abandon. During his confrontation with Ghostface in the hospital, Dewey makes a few head-smacking mistakes. Not shooting Ghostface in the head, going back alone to finish the job, and then letting himself be distracted by his phone, giving the killer a moment to recover, get the drop on him, and murder him in cold blood. The scene casts a dark cloud over the rest of the movie, but not in the manner the filmmakers likely intended. Rather than merely mourning Dewey's demise, many fans were left infuriated that he went out in such a needlessly idiotic way. Number 7. Keanu Reeves casting, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula is in many ways an incredible movie, one of the most stylishly decadent films of the 1990s, and an absolute triumph of practical effects-driven filmmaking. If Francis Ford Coppola's sumptuous gothic horror adaptation were a meal, it'd be a rich buffet we'd all lovingly gorge ourselves on, even if we might feel a little sick afterwards. But the veritable turd in the punch bowl is Keanu Reeves' hilarious miscasting in the role of protagonist Jonathan Harker. We love Keanu as much as anyone, but but he can't pull off a persuasive English accent to save his life. And every time he opens his mouth here, it's tough not to giggle at the poor guy trying with every fibre of his being to not sound like he grew up in Canada. It's all the more egregious given that Reeves is sharing the screen with undeniable acting lions like Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins. And while there's still a ton to enjoy throughout Coppola's film, the erroneous central casting strikes a fatal blow to its overall mood. Number 6. The extra final twist, The Last Exorcism. The Last Exorcism is a criminally underrated found footage romp. Or it would be if not for that final 10 minutes. The film follows a minister, Cotton Marcus, who is losing his faith and allowing a documentary crew to chronicle his final exorcism of a young girl, Nell Sweetser. We're led to believe that Nell is possessed by the devil, but near the last exorcism's end, it's more or less confirmed that Nell is merely a disturbed, traumatized girl who is impregnated by a local boy rather than Satan. Except because that smart, restrained ending apparently isn't enough for the popcorn-munching crowd, an additional twist was thrown out there at the last minute. The boy believed to have impregnated Nell is revealed to be gay, and so when Marcus returns to Nell's home, an occult ritual is taking place where Nell indeed gives birth to a demonic creature. In the final scene, Marcus runs towards the mayhem while the camera crew is killed off by Nell's family, ensuring this otherwise intelligent and subversive possession flick ends on a far more conventional schlocky note. Rather than resolve a supernatural tale with a grounded ending about a young woman dealing with her own repressed sexuality, it defaults to tired exorcism movie tropes. Disappointing isn't even the word. Number 5. Poor marketing, Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body may not be perfect, but it is a memorable and well-crafted horror comedy with a surging, righteously angry feminist undercurrent. Yet potential viewers would barely know it by the movie's widely criticized marketing campaign. Given that star Megan Fox was at the height of her fame at the time, courtesy of the Transformers franchise, the studio decided to center their marketing almost entirely around her sex appeal, effectively targeting horny teenage boys above all others. And so it was little surprise when two things happened. Said teenage boys got a much weirder, less sexy film than they were expecting, and the women who might actually connect with the film's feminist messaging stayed home because the trailers gave little indication of it. In light of the Me Too movement, Jennifer's Body has enjoyed something of a critical evaluation in recent years, with both director Karen Kusama and co-star Amanda Seyfried publicly condemning the marketing for dooming the picture upon original release. But if Fox, the studio, not the actress, didn't try and sell the movie so cynically up front, it might have had a very different shelf life over the last 15 years. Number 4. The lack of an ending, The Devil Inside. Oh, The Devil Inside. A generic, passable found footage flick which entered the halls of horror infamy due to its shambolic ending, if you can even call it an ending at all. The film climaxes with the central heroes being killed in a car accident, all while the possessed Isabella escapes into the night. At this moment, a title card flashes up on the screen, revealing that the case remains unresolved, before directing viewers to a website to read more about the ongoing investigation. The Devil Inside instantly became a punching bag among horror fans for featuring perhaps the cheekiest non-ending in the history of the genre, enough that some viewers reportedly requested refunds following the film's conclusion. To make matters worse, Paramount only hosted the website for a few years, and so for anyone who watches The Devil Inside today, they're pointed to a website that doesn't even exist. Plus, despite the film grossing a stonking $101.8 million worldwide against a mere $1 million budget, a sequel to resolve the story was never produced, possibly because the stink around the first picture's ending was so audience-alienatingly toxic. If it had a proper ending, though, The Devil Inside's reputation would surely be considerably better. It'd be regarded as a watchable, albeit not terribly remarkable, found-footage possession flick, rather than a flaming monument to Hollywood's greediest instincts. Number 3. The terrible spider effects. It may technically be a miniseries, but let's face it, 1990s It is basically a 3-hour, 2-part movie adaptation of Stephen King's iconic horror novel. It's also undeniably best remembered for Tim Curry's mesmerizing acting masterclass as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, as transformative a performance as anyone has ever given on screens big or small. However, its sublimely creepy tone is derailed late in the game when Pennywise reveals his true form as a giant spider. While this is true to King's novel, and in theory a massive arachnid should be plenty terrifying, the janky practical effects used to bring the spider to life are not great, if we're being polite. The cast and crew have spoken extensively about the issues they had realizing the spider on screen, spending $200,000 and more than 3 months to execute the sequence, which left just about everyone involved disappointed. Given that this is the climax of the story, it's a most unfortunate point to have a special effects failure, ensuring that it fails to fully pay off all the great work, namely Curry's magnificent performance, up to this point. Number 2, the nonsensical plot twist, High Tension. Perhaps no horror film in history has been as violently derailed by a god-awful twist ending as Alexander Aja's gut-wrenching slasher flick High Tension. For the overwhelming majority of its runtime, this is a lean, mean, ultra-violent cat-and-mouse chase movie as 2 female students, Marie and Alexia, flee from the unrelenting male serial killer. Aja doesn't seem to pay much mind to the killer's identity, enough that audiences will surely assume it isn't really the point. Instead, it's simply that these 2 women are trying to escape a seemingly unstoppable murderous force. But the third act drops an absolute clanger of a twist, that the killer has actually been Marie the entire time, and we've been watching the story from her unreliable, dissociated perspective, where she envisions the killer as a figment of her imagination. The problem is that this introduces so many apparent plot holes, where Marie appears to be in 2 places at once. And even if you can accept that Marie's perspective can't be trusted, it just feels like a cheap way to cheat the audience, as there's virtually no way for them to figure out the twist ahead of time. It's a damn shame, as the more straightforward film leading up to this dopey reveal was actually pretty fantastic. Number 1, retconning the first film, Brahms' The Boy 2. 2016's The Boy wasn't warmly received by critics, but it did turn a hefty profit at the box office and amassed something of a cult fan base, in large part thanks to its wild third act twist. That finale revealed that the various creepy happenings throughout the film weren't caused by the apparently possessed porcelain doll Brahms, because the real Brahms was actually still alive and living in the walls of his house. The film ended with the implication that Brahms would return in the sequel, only for Brahms' The Boy 2 to pull the rug out and retcon everything about the first movie's ending. The Boy 2 inexplicably ditches the whole adult Brahms angle and reverts to focusing on the possessed doll, which is ultimately revealed to have grotesque flesh beneath its porcelain exterior. Right. Now, to be clear, The Boy 2 was never a great or even particularly good sequel, but the utterly baffling retconning transformed it from an also-ran follow-up into something whose mere existence is genuinely questionable.